Earlier today, top-ranking officials from the Trump administration and the Chinese Communist Party met for a second day of trade negotiations at Lancaster House in London, a historical site that has long been a stage for international treaties. Now, these high-stakes negotiations are also happening as news broke yesterday that a third Chinese national was arrested by U.S. authorities for allegedly smuggling biological material into the country. As the world's leading economic and military powers attempt to forge a new trade deal, what other complications may be at play here? Here to discuss all this and more, Gordon G. Chang, a distinguished senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute and expert on U.S.-Chinese relations. He is the author of several books, including Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. You can follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Tony.
All right, so let's start. Let's go back last week. President Trump and she held a phone call, and it was obviously focused on trade, which set the stage for the conversations that have been taking place the last 2 days. What do we know about the contents of that call?
I think probably the most important thing was that they agreed to start negotiations in London, the ones that are currently ongoing. And also, President Trump said that he was going to go to China and that Xi Jinping was going to come to the United States. So those were the two big takeaways. President Trump also said that the talks were good over the phone. And I suppose that Xi Jinping probably did not want to sour relations by saying what he really felt. But there we stand, and we're going to find out what happens after this third day of talks in London. But the important thing, Tony, to remember is we've already had these talks with China in Geneva. There was a May 12th agreement, and China has already violated the May 12th agreement. So the question is, what are we talking to the Chinese about, especially when they're attacking our agriculture by bringing in all of these blights?
So what do you think China is after in having these conversations?
They're just trying to delay us. The more delay, the better from their perspective is what they think. And we know that because right after the May 12th agreement, they had a 90-day pause on elevated tariff rates. The Global Times, which is controlled by People's Daily, and People's Daily is the most authoritative publication in China, Global Times said 90 days would not be enough to negotiate a trade deal. Well, of course it's enough if you want to have a trade deal. But the Chinese just want to, I think, just shine us on.
I mean, this sounds very similar to what's going on right now with Iran, as the Trump administration negotiating with Iran over their nuclear plan, but it keeps dragging out. Israel getting a little nervous about that because the window of opportunity to possibly take out their nuclear facilities is slipping by. Who has the most at risk here if there's a failure to reach a reasonable trade agreement?
I think it's the Chinese, and it's because their economy is failing right now. And we know this from price data from February, March, April, and May. China's in a deflationary spiral. Deflation is an economy killer. Even their exports are down. So, yes, we have some vulnerabilities like rare earths, but the Chinese have greater vulnerabilities, and we should remember that as we negotiate. Because what the Chinese are trying to do is to intimidate us. And almost all the time it works. I would hope that President Trump says, no, I'm not going to be intimidated by Xi Jinping.
You talk about rare earths. How does the agreement that the U.S. signed with Ukraine factor in here to that leverage point that China has?
Well, anything that we can do to get rare earths helps our bargaining position. But obviously, when you talk about Ukraine, it's a war zone. As a practical matter, I'm not quite sure that we are going to get rare earths out of Ukraine in any reasonable time frame. But what we need to do is we put ourselves into this position. We created this vulnerability for ourselves by not mining rare earths and by not processing them. So this is really on us.
Now, you said their economy has the most at stake here, but from a political standpoint, if a trade agreement is not reached, we could see an increase in prices here in the United States. for a lot of products we've become dependent upon with China. Could this become a political problem in the midterm if people continue to see a rise in prices, which could fuel inflation?
Sure, it could be a political problem. I'm not so sure that the prices are going to increase that much because businesses have a lot of ability to adjust. But we got to remember, we have maintained really misguided trade policies for 3 decades. And we have maintained really misguided China policies for 3 decades. So as President Trump says, we're not going to get out of this without some cost. And the issue is, do we want manufacturing in the United States? If we're going to do that, which is absolutely critical in my view, we are going to have to bear some costs. This is going to be either we give up our sovereignty to China and say, let them rule the world, or we're going to have to rebuild our manufacturing, and we're going to have some sacrifices along the way.
Gordon, is this the time to fix this? I mean, when you look at this back and forth we've had with China for many years and this trade imbalance, it would appear that, as you're right, we got to take the medicine. It may not taste real good in the initial dose, but this is, if not now, when?
Yes, and the longer we delay this, the deeper the hole we're in. So right now, China is, as I mentioned, their economy is really in trouble. I believe it's contracting. The Beijing claims 5.4% growth in Q1, first quarter of this year. But that really is unrealistic when you start to think about all the underlying indicators that we see that actually point to a shrinking economy. So let's tell Xi Jinping, your economy is shrinking, and we'll make it shrink even more if you're going to continue to violate your trade deals with us. China violates every agreement it makes. And, you know, at some point, we just got to say, President Trump's got to say to the markets, look, we're just not going to put up with this anymore.
Gordon, you have about 45 seconds left. The news of a third Chinese national arrested for smuggling in these biological agents. Are these one-off cases, or is there a concerted plan here?
There's a concerted plan. In 2020, Americans in all 50 states received seeds from China unsolicited. This year, Temu, the online Chinese retailer, was sending seeds unsolicited to Americans. That's, I believe, an attempt to plant invasive species. That's an attack on our agriculture, like this fungus that has now been brought in. That's an attack on our agriculture, too. This is a biological weapons attack, Tony, and this is an attack on the United States of America. And I hope the Trump administration treats it with the seriousness that it deserves.
Gordon Chang, always great to see you.